a podcast. It's called Best of Friends. Here we go now, yeah!
Hey there, welcome to the Best of Friends podcast, episode 1, I guess. This is Mike from Sparkle Jets UK. We're a band with my bandmates here. I've got Susan.
Hello.
I got Jamie.
Hello.
And with us are our wonderful friends and label mates and label...
Heads?
Yeah, heads. Just calling someone a head seems odd. This is Christina Bolbenko and
Hello.
Rex Broom.
Hello.
We're all kind of hanging out here in our living room in beautiful Long Beach, California, to launch our little limited edition podcast, talking about our new record called Best of Friends, and it's a 2 LP set of cool songs that we recorded that were all songs done around 2000 by friends of ours in and around the LA pop scene. So we're going to make this podcast and interview a lot of different people whose songs we recorded, find out about who they are, what they did, what they're doing, and same goes for us. And just to give everybody a little insight on these songs and reminiscences of our time playing music 20 years ago and what we plan to do going forward. So anyway, here's a little bit of the lead-off track to get us started. This is Hold On Tight.
Wandering around so aimlessly without a clue. I keep on reaching out to you, but all I touch are cold walls. Don't give up now, we're gonna make it through, you see. This darkness that's surrounding me can only bring us closer. And I know things will get better. Yes, I know things will be fine if we hold on tight, hold on tight.
That's a little bit of the lead-off track from the new album. That was the song Hold On Tight, originally by Walter Clevenger and the Dairy Kings. Cool little song from the 2000s. So to get us started with episode 1, we've invited Rex and Christina to come down and kind of interview us and talk about this project and what it's all about.
Well, okay then. This is Rex, and this is Christina.
Hello.
All right.
I've already said that.
And yeah, we did indeed. Yes, yeah. We run Big Stir Records. We're going into our 6th year, and we started it right here in LA. And I think one thing I wanted to kind of get to just kind of get the ball rolling for people who are like completely unfamiliar with Sparkle Jets UK is let's just talk about, we're a Los Angeles based label. We also have a bunch of British artists on the label, and you guys are called Sparkle Jets UK. So
Yes,
let's
we
just
are.
do the elephant in the room. Talk about the name.
Okay, well, we had, I think when we first started, I don't even know one of our first names was Happy Birthday. And I think we thought of that because I realized, well, you can go to the party warehouse store and buy any number of things that say Happy Birthday on them, and we could use them for promos, or, we could hang up a Happy Birthday sign behind our band when we played, and it would be kind of like automatic merch. But the problem was our first show, it was like they thought it was a birthday party, so they literally just put
So
birthday
you go
party
instantly
plus
to
live band,
So you just skip right to the Spinal Tap and Puppet Show stage
Yes.
for the first gig. That's pretty great.
So
yeah.
right off the bat, our name was confusing and stupid. So I don't know what happened. I think I was doing artwork I was kind of inspired by seeing a lot of the initial drawings that they'd made for the Tomorrowland attractions at Disneyland back in the 50s, and some of the refurbs for the 60s, and it was all very mid-century, and I just kind of been introduced to that concept back in the 90s by these guys in my band, and they were, oh, that's mid-century modern. Oh, okay. And so I was kind of getting design elements from that to use on our artwork as we were kind of developing our look.
And that's what's also known as Jet Age.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Right.
So
one of the
we're
things
taking a step towards it. Yeah.
Right. One of the things they had on there, I was at the Disney gallery at Disneyland one day, and there was it showed the McDonnell Douglas logo that they'd put on Rocket to the Moon or whatever. and I was like, that's cool looking. It was like had a circle with like, it looked like a rocket, you know, going into orbit. And so I kind of used that as an idea, and I combined that with a plane and made it more level. And it was interesting because not long after we made our logo, the Boeing Airlines bought McDonnell Douglas, and they merged their two logos together, and they look exactly like our logo. But indeed, our variant of that was technically around before Boeing did it. But since they owned the logo originally, I couldn't really complain, now could I?
But Mike, before we even started doing the logo stuff, before you did that, there was the name Sparkle Jets.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even know if that... I don't know.
No, we were in the Guitar Center, Mike.
I can also share some light on that.
I don't know that that's...
Originally, what always you had said that when we made it big,
well, yeah,
that we would buy
Yes.
a Sparkle Jet Gretsch.
Oh,
And
matching
so
ones.
the original
Matching ones.
the original band name was Sparkle Jet. And then one day I was sitting, at lunch reading a BAM magazine, and I saw a band called Sparkle Jet, which I didn't know that there was an existing band from Fresno.
I believe they're called Sparkle Jets, and we actually know them and have shared bills with them. So it's kind of interesting. They're still kicking around in the mix, and actually a really good band.
And we're kind of in a similar genre. We didn't even know that then. But I mean, I'm a little fuzzy on the whole thing with the guitar, because I knew what a Sparkle Jet was. It was a...
But we were in the Guitar Center, and we were inspired.
That did happen. We might have had the name already.
And we were actually...
I don't remember.
We were going by Sparkle Jets, and...
Of course, yes.
And you'd said that it was a thing, if we made it big, that we'd all buy matching Sparkle Jets.
Correct.
So I mentioned this to you, and it's panic mode, because you've already done the artwork.
And it was pretty nice. We'd been kind of handing it out. We had one art that said Sparkle Jets on it, and
correct.
It was all done.
And then you basically talked to one of your friends, and I don't know if it was Ken or somebody, and they said, well, just put a UK on it. Like the, what's the band UK?
Well,
Charlatans UK,
Charlatans
Jam UK, English
and so
Beat,
we thought that was kind of funny, and we go, okay. And then all of a sudden, what's really funny is most of our press came about, early press, before the IPO shows, would always make jokes about the fact that, like, hey, are you from the UK?
Yeah.
And then we'd have to say, no, we're from Orange County.
Right. and that's been an interesting thing for us too, because I mean, when we started, working with the bands that have been on the LA pop scene for a while, people thought of us as an LA label, but it was very shortly after that we ended up signing a number of British artists. So we had Spy Genius and Amoeba Teen and Nick Frater in the mix pretty quickly. People kind of came to expect us to be putting forward, a pretty wide range of things geographically, but a lot of UK and a lot of LA. So for the people that have known you guys for a long time, which is a great deal of our audience, it's, there's not even a blink. But for the people that are getting introduced to bands by knowing us or coming in through other people, then that is a thing that still, decades later needs to be walked through, because the expectation is there that we have some UK bands on the label roster.
And now we know that, it's just such a nightmare the way the graphics of the name are, because, Mike, what did you say that, like, how many versions you can do, typesetting?
Yeah, it's a lot. Well, at the time, it was early internet, early social media days.
Yeah.
Like texting a lot. And it just became a thing to kind of stop capitalizing stuff. And I thought it looked visually cool to keep it all lowercase. So that was the first thing.
There was a lot of stylization like that in that time, and you would have the fire hose thing and that dog thing. There, it was kind of distinctive at that time, and then it sort of went crazy after that too.
Yeah, and we had all lowercase, and then because it had the word sparkle, I thought, oh, cool, we can put an asterisk in there, and it's like a star. Yeah, because all like Fire Hose, I always liked their logo because they just had all caps except for the first letter. They just reversed it, so it was like when you could do that, you automatically had a logo in the article when they wrote about you in the newspaper or whatever. So and that's kind of works. The problem is almost everybody gets it wrong, or they capitalize UK. Or
there are periods or not periods in the UK, and then of course there's the hashtag problem where the whole thing runs together. You can't put the asterisk in there, and then you end up with SUK at the end of it.
Yeah,
that's kind of. But who knew?
Yeah, so there's like 100 problems with it, and putting stuff on the streaming services. because the first, I think when we got signed to Smile for our second album, one of the things that we just signed away right off the bat, unknowingly, was streaming of some kind. So our stuff just automatically showed up everywhere, which was cool, I guess, except that we had no control over it. Yeah. And they got the name kind of funky. And then every time we would put a song out on a comp, the name would come up wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you would have gone through CD Baby and they would have effed it up their way, and you would have gone through DistroKid and they would have effed it up their way, and then you land with us and we're sticklers for it, but even that becomes an outlier. That to getting it right becomes an outlier after a while.
So like we've put out a ton of material and we've had a lot of songs on comps, so there's like a ton of stuff that we've done out there in the ether. The problem is if you try to just dial it in and say, yeah, let me listen to this band, you have to struggle. In fact, if you found try this podcast, good for you.
Right.
And you must have either gotten lucky or tried really hard or clicked.
Well, we did our
link.
job.
So there you go. Anyway, we'll try to keep the podcast interesting. But that's the history of our name. We also play music.
Myself to size and melt the stars. I'm so hot for you, I think I couldn't die. And I set myself to I remember like it was last summer, a bit too real to really be true. How I'd fallen first thing in the morning, cried for help and how long came you.
There's a little bit of a song called Battle Song, originally by Adam Daniel, one of the ones that we've always wanted to take a stab at. And we're going to be sprinkling a few of the songs throughout this podcast that maybe we won't be talking about later. So, and Rex, tell the people what we're going to be doing here with this podcast.
We know that this podcast is going to go on. You're going to be speaking to a lot of people to whom you're paying tribute from, that sort of came up in the same context, the same scene as you guys, and that's going to be a big part of it. But I think to get it started, we should talk about, first of all, how the band started, what those days were like, and
that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, what was this scene like that was really the hotbed at the time, and to which this record pays tribute in it.
How did you meet, first of all?
I was in a band called Version 7, and the guy that I was playing with was kind of well known around Orange County for doing open mic nights.
And this is around what era we're talking? This is
mid-90s or so. And so we would do actual band shows on occasion, or try to get an actual band together and call ourselves a thing and go book something. But on an almost nightly basis, otherwise, we were out hanging out at all these different little coffee houses, just day to day. And I would go out almost every night and go to either this place called the Winged Heart in Fullerton or some other places like that, and just see people. There's a little scene going on. And one night I was there and I was having a really rough time with the guy in my band, and he'd said some crap to me on stage or something, and I just remember quitting. I'm just like, I am done playing music with any of you people. And I think right before that, it must have been before that, because I hadn't maybe packed my stuff away yet. Maybe it was before he made me mad. But there was these other folks there at the open mic night, and they were on stage and said something like, does anybody out there like Neil Diamond? And I'm like, yeah. Does anybody know, do you know, tell them the story.
Okay, so that was I was in a band called the Patty and Susan Show, and Jamie was playing with that band at the time too. And yeah, we were just talking a little Neil Diamond love, and then I said, does anybody know Solitary Man by Neil Diamond? And then Mike kind of perked up because he hadn't been looking in anybody's direction until then. And then he said, yeah, I know that song. And a lot of people actually said, oh, yeah, Mike knows every Neil Diamond song. And so we invited him to come up on stage, and you joined us for that song.
Yeah, and I do remember it because how would you forget that?
Yeah. Well, because I thought it was fun, a girl singing "Solitary Man." So, it
So
worked for
we
me.
went and sang that, and then I quit, and then
The other band.
And then but then we patched it up as one does, and I don't know, but and then we're trying to get our band together and went through a lot of different changes, and we had a gig booked at a bar in like Santa Ana or something, and we didn't have anybody to play bass, and the guy said, I know this guy named Jamie. He's in this thing called the Patty and Susan Show. Maybe he can play with us. And so we played this gig with Jamie, and it was like and this other guy we knew named Fletcher Harrington on drums. And for the first time, we actually kind of sounded like a band. Because I got to play guitar, because a lot of times I would play bass a lot, because there was no one else to do that. So it was nice to kind of be able to play guitar. And long story short, we did that. It was fun. We booked another thing to go play with Jamie, and he was like, things kind of didn't work out. And then he went and you guys had a baby, like right then. And we were up recording an album in my cabin in Crestline, and he had asked Jamie to come up and play bass on one of the songs. So you came up and did that. And then you went back home and told Susan, hey, there's this cool cabin, you should come. And they all came up. So we all kind of like regathered up in the cabin and hung out for a few hours. And then we just decided to merge our bands together, sort of. So Susan and her friend Patty had been doing a thing, and they had songs. And I had songs of my own that my band was supposed to be doing, but we never really did them because the guy I was in a band with would never let me play them. Like, they'd be on the tapes we'd send out and the demos and everything, but when it came to shows, he would never play along. So it was either I could do it alone or not do it. And these guys were very, very kind to me and said, well, if he doesn't want to play them, we'll learn them. So they learned all my stuff. I learned all their stuff. And we did a show where we had the people in the band really did represent 4 different bands. So we did 4 sets of the different amalgamations. And then that happened one time, and then we kind of spun most everybody off, and we became this.
It's funny how the memories come, because I'm a guy who writes in a diary, so I have a totally diary with things sequential laid out. And the story was kind of right, but when that big moment when we were at the Wingard Cafe, Mike was doing his thing, which is always technical and running around doing things. I actually went to John Carrillo, who was the lead singer of that band, Virgin 7, and said, hey, I play bass, and then he basically said to me, hey, well, I'm recording up in the mountains, and I'd love for you to come up and play with us. And at that point, Susan was almost ready to give birth. She's up on stage. And so I scheduled the time to go up to the mountains to hang out with Mike. I meet Mike now. I really get to know him because we're at his grandmother's cabin. And I lay a track down. A lot of the things he mentioned were true, where we grouped the bands together. But the real moment when it changed was Carrillo was doing a gig at what's the place in the lab? There's a coffee shop.
I was out of
Gypsy.
town.
It was the
Gypsy Den.
Gypsy Den. And you were out of town, like you said. And Patty, one of the lead vocalists that was in Susan's band, both of them loved John's material that was with Mike. And he did this song called Love Song from the Coast, and that was one of their favorite songs. So in typical pop scene fashion, the girls get up on stage and start singing background harmony behind
But
him.
we were not invited.
Yes.
Okay, but
Apparently that was a thing.
in our world,
That's what you do.
it's a sweet thing,
Yes.
because
That's what you do.
you're paying homage to the singer, and we're not like doing a jazz fingers or anything. We're getting up there and
Are
we're
you
trying to
sure?
back them up, and I wasn't doing jazz fingers.
And most guys would, I'm sounding old now, but most guys would really love having 2 girl singers come up and sing with them. But this guy's kind of a prima donna and basically, did not like that at all. The word comes back to Mike that, oh yeah, John's really not happy with that thing. And the girls were not happy. Let's put it that way.
Well, it just blew our minds. We thought, oh my gosh, we were having a moment together. We thought this was spiritual.
Right.
And, but he did not see it that way. So then it was just like
He did like your music, though. I mean, he had a tape of yours in his car. I remember listening to it, and I remember looking at it and going, this is really interesting. It was intriguing. It was also very kind of homey and homemade, and had these dorky little drawings all over it and little squiggly lines, and it was all kind of handwritten, which I found later on to be Susan's style.
The copy machine is my art medium.
Well, and they wanted it that way because
I know.
When they recorded it, they called it the bedroom tapes, and so they wanted it to be totally as DIY as you could get, on cassette, and that's kind of how that happened.
And it was cool, and then all of a sudden here we are, and we did that one big gig, and it was really fun, and it was finally, I was able to actually sing some of my own material with a band, which no one had ever. And I've been playing and writing songs for 10 years, but nobody had ever been interested in letting me do that or being involved in that really. So that was great, and we did his set, and he just kind of was like, and he wouldn't come up on stage with us. He only came up when it was time to do his songs. So everyone else was there the whole night, but he just couldn't hang. And
well, he said that thing too. I can't sing backup. He wouldn't even sing backup to our songs. I don't do harmonies. And we knew it. I know what that means. Ever since I was 7 years old, I knew what that meant. Okay.
And as educators, you encounter it to this day.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of other. I mean, I could go on and give you a lot of other juicy tidbits of things around that time that happened that kind of sucked. But at the end of the day, the moral of the story is we ended up doing our own thing, and eventually the people spun off of that, and it just remained us, the three of us, and then we needed a new drummer.
We've always needed one.
Well, because Fletcher was doing things more with Patty.
He was he was in Cowboy Buddha too, so it's worth saying that he was in his own.
Yeah, and I remember one time I gave him one of our first CDs, Sparkle Jets. Who's that? I go, that's us, dude. He goes, oh.
Don't you remember the first? I thought ads are really kind of funny back then because it wasn't the internet. So the ad you wanted how did you say it? You said looking for a drummer a heavy metal drummer that likes the Beatles. Or something along those lines.
Yeah.
The Recycler.
Could be,
Oh, yeah, the
We were
Recycler.
looking for
Music
drummers and
Connection.
recyclers
That would be.
still.
And so we did get an epic drummer named James DeBow that was just like this punk rock surfer kind of drummer that just made us sound crazy.
Well, the funny thing is, I already knew the guy. I'd recorded one of his bands, and I had asked him to be in this band a couple times, and he turned me down.
Because he was busy playing other bands.
And he just he's like, I don't know, man, that doesn't really sound like something I want to do, and he basically turned me down. And then we'd been trying to get people interested, and we realized at one point, like, putting an ad in the paper is kind of dangerous.
Oh yeah.
Oh no!
To have them show up at your house or something.
Right. Things were changing. This was interesting.
Yeah,
because we would go. We'd have them come to the house, and there would always be really weird. Like we'd have a feeling, and we'd all talk about it. Like, we could be killed.
Yeah, we heard stories about that happening around the time where people would book time at your studio, then show up, and as they're showing them around, they would just pull out a gun and tie you up and take all your crap.
Oh my God.
But luckily, we didn't have anything like that happen. But we had weird guys. Like a guy would come and say, "Oh, what kind of beer does the singer drink? Because I'm gonna bring her a 6-pack."
Yeah.
And he would ride his bicycle there. Drummers riding a bicycle to the audition? That's weird.
There's something to be said for this because you're used to thinking, who knows what kind of weirdos you're going to meet on the internet. Who knows what kind of weirdos are going to answer these kinds of ads too? Because that's you have even less eyes on what's happening there. And I'm sure everyone that went through BAM and Music Connection and the Recycler has stories.
So we thought we were getting really smarter because we go and meet him at the Denny's down by our house first.
Yeah, and we figured, because it was the first time we set that up. We go, okay, just meet. He called back and we said, just meet us at this Denny's. Down by our house, and we figured we'd meet there. If it was good and we felt like a good vibe, we would say, hey, do you want to come back to the house? It's right down the street. We'll jam. Right. And we're sitting there waiting at our table, and I look at the door opens, and in walks this guy I've already asked to join the band twice. And he sees us, me and them sitting there, and he just was like, ugh. And I remember his face turned red. He's like, hi, guys.
But he really elevated us to that next level. And this was put in perspective historically. That was like the period between 96 and around 99. And during this time, it was really funny because we thought again, communication back then was not what it is now. We thought that we were onto something totally unique that other people weren't doing.
We thought we were alone.
And we decided to do a big star cover, and we thought
And a Beach Boys and
no
an
one would
ELO.
wanna
No
do
one
that.
knows those bands.
And we didn't realize, I don't know who told you this, but someone else told Mike once, there's this guy that teaches college that likes this kind of music. And he's referring to David Bash.
David Bash, that's right. But Jamie, before we get into the history of that, let's listen to one more little snippet of a song. This is actually by a guy I met at David Bash's house one of the times I went there. His name is Linus of Hollywood. He had a big, CD out at the time that everybody loved, and this is one from it called Good Sounds. Our version, of course.
Everyone's leaving, the party is winding down. But it's so nice to be in your company. I was just thinking, we were both drinking and you live way downtown. Things would be much easier if you just stay a while. Good sounds are on the way. I'll play your favorite record if you promise that you'll stay. 'Cause I've been waiting for this moment to come for so long, and now it's time.
Okay, that was Good Sounds. Now, getting back to our talk about David Bash, I do remember hearing about IPO and Poptopia, and I'd heard a lot of stories from my friend David
Coble, who knew us all and knew our bands, was in that not Matchbox 20 Cent Crush.
20 Cent Crush, yeah.
Very different thing.
Yes.
With Phil Rosenthal, and he kept saying, "You got to come down to Jack's Sugar Shack. There's this cool scene going. There's people you can give your CD to, and start plugging into this thing." And the other guy, John from Version 7, was like, "Yeah, I've heard about this place called Spaceland. There's a lot of cool stuff going on there." And I was reading stuff in Band Magazine about this crazy band called the Negro Problem and Baby Lemonade and things like that.
And Jason Faulkner.
Well, yeah, and some of that stuff I'd seen the Grays at my college, and that was cool. And I met those guys there, and it was like there was a lot of stuff going on, a lot of weird stuff floating around.
And the Muffs was also happening really hardcore.
Yeah, and I snuck into their show. That's what I did. Yeah, it was the one time I did that at my college. I knew because I worked there. I knew how to get behind the vending machine, and there was a line going through there, and they were checking, and I snuck behind the vending machine and got in and got past the ticket taker. The only time I've ever done something like that.
You slide out.
That's funny because I it didn't hit me until us talking that Dave Coble really is kind of responsible for us understanding all of these people and inviting the people to play at the Hub in Fullerton when the Negro Problems played with us and some others.
It goes all the way back to Michael Toth, the guy that I know in Ohio that is also a tiki guy, and everything else is like I always attribute it to him because he one day told me, "Mike, there's this, remember Dave Coble?" Yeah, of course, because I'd known him back in high school. He was in this band that we kind of followed and we liked and we were friends with. And he said, "Can you find him? There's this label wants to get in touch with him and see if he wants to do some music." And I go, "I think I can find him. I know where he used to live." And I went there and found him. He introduced me to them, and things just went bop 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 from there. And like all the things that have happened in our lives, wouldn't have happened had that guy not told me, "Go find Dave." And I hopped in my car and I went looking for him.
That should be the
and
next
there was
one.
another guy that did the same thing for us. We were in a whole different scene of musicians in Orange County before we knew Mike. And there was this guy named Craig Patterson who was a big part of that scene. And then all of a sudden, Craig one day comes over out of the blue and just said, "There's this guy up in Fullerton named Mike Simmons, and you guys, I think, would really like him." And then it went a while before we actually did meet you.
Yeah, it was probably years before you actually met me. That's because I used to get my tapes duped at this place by my college. And they were not great, but this guy understood. I remember this is in like the early '90s. He gave me a CD. He goes, "Here's a CD I think you'll like," and he gave me the Richard X. Heyman "Hey Man" on CD, and I was like, "Yeah, that's the shit." And it's just funny how these things kind of happen, and you look back and go, "Oh, weird,"
So can I?
That first album this was coming up now in this time from around 1996 to 98 when we were actually recording a bunch of songs. Mike had originally done a record, I think it was called "I Have No Equal."
Well, yeah, and I was doing the Version 7 thing, and it was clear that I was gonna put a lot of those songs on there, and then and I kind of did, but I'd made a little cassette too called "I Have No Equal" that had a lot of my songs on it, just to hand out to whoever I knew, and I think I probably gave you guys one of those. And the Version 7 record eventually, there was an early version of that half of the songs were his and half were mine. And I'd done a lot of them I had like a Fostex B16 little studio set up. And you guys had an ADAT studio in your house. And when we met, we started working on stuff together. And the Version 7 album never really materialized in that way, thankfully. So I took all those songs that we'd started playing together and added you guys to my tracks.
And you put some Patty and Susan songs where you revised them and we changed them.
We changed them around and re-recorded those. So we took songs from both of those bands and blended them together, and that's what our first album is. So some of those tracks run back to like 1994.
Wow.
And they had some of them had different titles, different lyrics, different parts. But I added these guys to that, and yeah.
And Susan was doing a lot of, because she had worked at Capitol Records and she was into the alternative marketing with School of Fish, right, and several other people that you broke. But she was really helping develop the business plan for us. And so right when we released this record, because it was an indie release, we didn't really know what to do. We got 1,000 copies coming in. So Susan goes, hey, you should go put some displays out. So I took some displays that I had held over from working for R.J. Reynolds and basically went to Pepperland, which is, a very cool record store in Orange. And I put this display right next to the counter, and I told the guy, if you put it next to the counter, I'll give you, $2, and then made some kind of financial arrangements and put it all on consignment.
And we sold them cheap, like $5 or 99 cents, something stupid.
And so what was really fun is at that record store, and this is when things really changed for us, at that record store, a guy named John Borak walked into this record store and found it, and then he calls his buddy David Bash, who was this professor that we didn't really know how to get in touch with, and was running the International Pop Overthrow Festival. And the next thing you know, David Bash is contacting... Did he contact you or Susan?
I don't know. He might have called
I can't remember.
Yeah, but he basically
on
invites us to play the IPO, International Pop Overthrow Festival, in 1999 in the summer. And at that point, that's when everything changed for us.
I would like to mess with the timeline a little bit right now, because we set the stage for what it was like when you guys were starting, and we're on the cusp of talking about the scene. I want to jump forward to the record that's coming out now. Because I think one thing is, it is quite some time has elapsed, and the title of the record is "Best of Friends," and obviously on one level that speaks to the bond that you guys still have, that's endured for all that time, which is really unusual. And there's been activity from the band, but not a record for a good long time. So that's the one meaning of the title. The other one is going to relate to the folks that you guys met on the scene. But before we start talking about that, I kind of would like to hear you guys talk about what it means to have worked together for so long, and maybe the impetus for reinitiating, starting recording, because this is not the only project. You guys are not back just to do this.
Right.
There's new material coming as well. So
new in quotation mark.
Edit that out. It's new. No one's ever
it is new.
Previously unheard. But yeah, let's talk about what it's like sort of re-entering this now, and what's changed and what's still the same about the work process, and what led up to this particular record, Best of Friends.
Some of the changes, actually, I hate to say it, but was my fault. Back when the albums were first coming out, I was working on being a student teacher. And so, fortunately, during that process, I was able to kind of really connect with the kids by inviting Susan and Mike to help out with doing a battle of the bands that we did at Fountain Valley High School.
So
Where-
were you a teacher at that point, or were you the librarian?
I was a student teacher when I first started thinking about doing a club that I organized called the Loud Music Club, and the kids back then were it's totally Blink 182 and all the kind of emo bands, pop punk was out. So I did get hired. I thought I was going to get hired as a history teacher, which was my credential, but they didn't need a history teacher, so I wound up being offered this job as the school library media specialist. Immediately started doing a club in the library with people playing rock and roll in the library. And we did, our first shows, and it really worked well. So what happened is Sparkle Jets were this in-between period when I had just gotten hired as a teacher. Susan and Mike were really the face of the band because, in fact, a lot of people, Susan and I had been married for many years, but would all assume that Michael was her husband because they were always going up to LA and hanging out in clubs, and I was either taking classes, and when I was taking classes, Susan would be home with our son, and then when they were up in LA doing Power Pop things, then it would be them going up there, and I'd be watching our son because you always make trade-offs. So all of a sudden, because we worked so well, fast forwarding a little bit to about 2004, Mike wound up getting hired as a teacher. Susan wound up becoming the supervisor for the academy that we worked at, and that was where our whole focus was.
And as a side note, everyone in this room has done their time as teaching and specifically with a musical bent. So yeah.
Right.
So I'm not taking credit necessarily for this album, but Michael is always creating something. That's just his personality. He is always going to be doing something. And I know that I would kind of put the kibosh a little bit because we're close friends. I mean, best friends reflects our friendship as well. But now that I've retired, all of a sudden I'm not putting the kibosh because I'm like, yeah, that sounds great, Mike. Because he's always pushing, hey, let's do this. And, and I was a little bit more of the, no, man, we got classes. We got to do the school thing. So I think that's my perspective on this thing.
Well, that was our band for a while, APA.
Yeah.
And the rock and roll program and teaching,
Still kind of is in a lot of ways because I'm still there. Jamie's done, but we're still there, very much there every day. And
but hey, if this record really sells well enough, maybe.
Yeah, the worldwide domination of Big Stir Records. When the
Could you try to say that
notes start rolling
a
in
little bit more sarcastically?
Yeah.
I was being completely.
And we, as we started working with the bands on the scene, which had was a little bit quieter than it was in its heyday. But
it was dead.
Yeah, and like Jamie was saying, Mike's always working on stuff, and just there were a lot of projects that Mike was working on. Of course, a lot of gigs that we played together with our band, the Armoires, kind of even before the label. So we were really happy to be working on these projects. We kind of speak the same language, and it was always sort of a thing that Sparkle Jets never officially went away. It would be great to do something, and we ended up the if I'm not mistaken, like sort of in the in between period after your proper albums, there was the 45 from Ardent, and we were really happy to be able to put that out. It is related to Big Star. We're called Big Stir. It was a natural on a number of levels.
Mm-hmm. We even used the logo at first when we did our Big Stir live shows. Oh, we asked for permission.
Well, they stole it.
They did steal it too. We technically would be like beholden to a supermarket chain in the South or something. I guess.
Right. It's like when we heavily quoted Led Zeppelin on this album, but it's if there's anyone you can steal from, it's them because they sold everything.
It was a furniture company, right? Big Star Furniture.
No, it's a
market,
like a supermarket,
like a
supermarket,
basically across the street from. It may still be there. I mean, people send pictures of at least.
I think it's like it was right near the right next door to the studio, the original studio.
Yeah,
they moved the studio not long after.
You've got to the point where it seemed to be a viable thing, and I think you guys probably knew that we were on standby. Whatever you guys were going to do, we were going to be happy to get behind it.
Yeah, because as far as a community goes, or even artists at our level, label or no label, we're gonna make records.
Yes.
Because we can. We've always had, even before I met these guys, they had their own little studio. I had my own little studio. Nowadays, it's even more common to do that. Back then, it wasn't as common.
There's this like-mindedness, though, of the whole scene, of you guys, of everybody in this room, and especially, all of us in this room, but you too, Michael. But about what I want to say is that there's this sweet thing that happens just from the first show that we started playing with these new friends, sharing a back line of equipment. That sounds like an easy thing,
It's not.
But when we would play shows before we met power pop people, nobody wanted to do that. Everybody insisted on having their own big guitar rig, and everybody wanted to play a 2-hour set and this and that. And there's something different happening here. It's a sweet thing. Everybody is sharing and they're borrowing, and and everybody wants everybody to do well.
Yeah, and everybody stays around and watches everybody else's set.
Yes.
And I think that made us well equipped for the sort of post-rock universe, because you can't. There's just a lot less. Not only just our age, but the music in general is just there's less of it. There's not less of it quantity-wise, but it has a far less visibility. There's never probably going to be another rock and roll hit ever again. And for those of us who kind of have stuck in there, your bookings are going to be whatever you can make them be at this point.
Yeah.
And you have a choice of, hanging on to your outdated rock and roll ego, or you could be people like us who were community oriented the whole time. And I think that makes us pretty well suited for this new sort of
Yeah, there was
scale.
a community vacuum that we felt. Everything was fragmented, and I say this all the time, but people were being sandwiched between two different genres and dragging their friends to see them for $10 a pop, and they come for that half hour and they leave. They don't like the band before or after.
Yeah,
and so
this is LA. I mean,
but that's still how it is probably, and how it was before us. The difference when you're working within your genre is you kind of, aside from the fact that you might like the other bands on either side of you, you kind of share a lot of things, not just music taste, but even like the kind of instruments you bring, or the stuff you want to do, or what you plan to do with them. And if you know that the other band that you're with, that you might want to like share backline with, is doing the same thing you're doing, they're not going to like spill a beer on your amp or light something on fire or kick your stuff over. You just kind of, that they're geeking out in the same frequency that you are, and that they're going to respect your thing and your people and your audience and your merch table and everything that goes with it. And we would, early on, sometimes we'd book our own shows if we had a special thing we wanted to do for a special reason or a special time, a certain place. And we might call some friends and they would be like, sure, we'll do it. But 90% of the time, it was other friends of ours from the scene that were doing a thing or decided it, and they would call us.
Yeah.
So we never had to book anything. And I think it would have gone on longer, except that there was a few key bands kind of, exploded or imploded. And then mutated. And then a lot of other people just kind of like, either decided to go have kids finally, got married, got divorced, had some kind of like external things that kind of stopped them. And for us, we were still kind of trying to grind away at it. We'd actually had a little bit of a renaissance amongst ourselves, when we got to about drummer 13, because we always had a different drummer. It seemed like every show. And I got kind of tired of teaching our complicated crap to yet another person. But we got kind of stable and kind of started rehearsing. Like we said, let's practice once a week, whether we have a show or not. Let's try to write songs as a group instead of just bringing in stuff when we have it, and having a more regular lineup. And we did that for a while, and it was good. But the impetus was kind of out of the scene, and then work just kind of swallowed our lives. Otherwise, we would never really have stopped. But other than, we've always kind of, from this time we started, we've always kind of been a family, even amongst ourselves. And we'd want to do something, we'd hang out. So it'd be like, let's go have dinner. So we'd go have dinner, and they'd bring their kit, and we would just before us would just have dinner, and that became something we would do once a week, and then it became like every couple of days, and then it's like, let's go play a show, and we would go, or let's go, and we'd start doing vacations and go
Little
to the
tours.
cabin and tours, and now it's like if any of us do anything, it's like, well, we just all assume that we're going. We're going to New Orleans in a couple of weeks. It's like we're just going. So, and we've always kind of been that. And then we started working together, and so it's like we kind of invent all these ways to keep the fam tight.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, Susan's making Thanksgiving dinner. Oh, I gotta go. So we just make it.
Your family.
Make an effort. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that really helps. And by doing because I went and did the first days of summer because I just had the stuff. And
This is Michael's solo album from 2000.
Yeah, the orange one. You look it up. Anyway, but having doing something called Sparkle Jets is always going to be a little more interesting because other than we're all on it, they can sit here and talk about it, and it's not just me in a vacuum. And if I make artwork for the album or we come up with a song, then we're all kind of invested in it, and here we are. I think I lost track of your.
No,
where you were leading this.
No, I think that covers it. I mean, we understood there's a point where something that's persisted for all this time starts to gain momentum again, and it's going to take a little while to unfold the exact way this was. There was new original material in play, but there was a moment when it clicked that this scene, and we've just kind of talked about how it sort of dissipated, but it obviously was this really sort of key, halcyon period. And for the folks that are discovering you guys for the first time, or even kind of discovering this music sort of for the first time, the collection of songs that you worked on for this record, Best of Friends, and Mike, you and I have talked about this a little bit too. There's two ways to look at this record, and one is that if you were there, you're looking at a band that was part of it, paying tribute to the other bands of that time. It's going to bring back a lot of memories, not just of what you guys were like at that time, but what the context was and the scene was. And the other way, if someone's listening to this to just sort of understand where this all comes from, is perhaps outside of LA, or perhaps people that came to the music later are not even really aware of this scene, or may have heard of a couple of the bands that you guys are covering on this. But it almost is, it can be looked at as like a double record, and it's a double record of like the best pop songs you've never heard.
Right.
So hence Best of Friends.
Yeah, Best
the
of Our
other
Friends.
Meaning.
Yeah, that was a little piece of a song called No One Rides for Free, originally by the Andersons. And we're here getting back into our conversation, talking about the motivations behind this album. And
the only reason I've ever learned to even play an instrument is because I wanted to make records. I'm not really interested in playing live or writing songs. I don't care. I just want to record things. And unless
oddly, he's really good at all that stuff.
I've done a lot of covers. It needs
to be said,
Yeah, and it's not like I love necessarily covers per se. I just love recording things and listening back. So I need songs in order to do that. So you need fodder, you grist for the mills. So, and I very rarely write songs, and it's gotten to where that's like such a trickle now. It may be 4 years between a song and a new song. Just depends. But I remember like a couple summers ago, I was just in my shower, just being kind of angry that I just wish I had some kind of song so I could record something. And I was listening into something and realized, like, before the Beatles, or even a little after, but before then, if you were a singer or an artist or whatever, you'd get, and maybe somebody saw you and said, I want, I'm going to pay for you to make a record or a single or whatever. You wouldn't have to have a song. Right. They would, they would say, well, here's a list of songs that we own the publishing to, or that our staff writers wrote. Pick one, or here's one we picked.
Separate industries at that time,
right? And so you would just, you're an artist. You'd pick out 10 songs, 12 songs, and go record them and put them out, and then 6 months later you'd do it again. And nobody cared. It was fine. And you didn't have to write it. The Beatles kind of wrecked it for everybody.
Beatles and Dylan, yeah.
Yeah, and then
it
became covers became like an also extra instead of
they automatically classified as filler from there on out.
Kind of,
and
depending on your outlook,
yeah, which is a shame, because there's just so much to be said about a brilliant performance and interpretation of a great song, and sometimes that magical match or that counterintuitive match.
Yeah, and at least amongst our ilk, our musician and songwriter types, it's like we judge negatively if you're not really making. Because think about it, like even now, the most popular artists in the world, the songs that are on top of the charts, they're not necessarily written by those people.
No, they have like 10 writers.
It was a normal thing for a stretch.
We kind of retrenched.
We went back
to only now it's not 2 guys, it's 30 guys,
right.
Writing this thing.
So I'm in the shower thinking about this and just kind of going, well, crap, if it was 1961, I could just do any songs I wanted, put it out, and everyone would be like, wow, great songs. You sang really well. That was great. Okay, cool, next. And then I remembered, in the back of my head, something clicked. We had put out this is another long story, but we'd put out this album. It was a tribute to ourselves. I don't know if I want to save that story, but
yeah, this might be a separate podcast.
Yeah, it might have to be separate, but
it is the setup.
It is the kernel of the genesis of the protean idea.
Sum it up in 10 words, Mike.
We'd made a joke at one of the first shows where we'd met everybody on the pop scene, and they'd kind of met us and seen us for the first time, and it was kind of when we kind of hit our first big impact, and there was a joke going around about trib comps, because they were everywhere, and they still are, but it was really, really hot stuff then. It's like they were coming out all day long, and somebody made a joke, there should be a tribute to the Sparkle Jets, ha ha ha, and we were like, yeah, ha ha, and on the way home we thought, that's kind of stupid and ballsy and dumb. What a nice marketing maneuver. Like,
I just want to say,
and we just went ahead and did it.
That kind of thing is from then to now. I mean, this is something that we like to just preserve. The why the hell not kind of thing. I mean, it's a weird little sort of punk rock offshoot of the pop scene, is to just do something. When you come up with that dumb idea, do it.
Yeah, so you guys definitely have. Yeah, with your last album was very much that, and it worked out super well for you.
Forgot how
it's
punk
super,
rock that was.
Yeah, very punk rock idea.
For anyone that doesn't know, we put out singles every month as a fake band. So
because we could.
There were, we had the label, so we were putting out all these singles by lots of other people.
We amused ourselves.
So we were like, nobody's even going to notice if we put out a band they've never heard of that's supposed to be from Detroit, and it's called
Hamtramck.
Yeah, and there were fake stories for each of these bands.
They all had fake names too.
But you're good at making up like a lot of detail like that. It's one of your strong suits, and not having anyone expect it to be what it was or be you. It just, and it for you and the listener, it wipes the slate clean. And it's whatever you want it to be. And
we could actually have pulled out of it any time. We could have,
right? But it worked really well.
If it wasn't working, it would have been fine. And we also could have put it out as like a lower key compilation rather than a record. But with all bets off, it kind of worked out okay.
And it's a good record, and there's some covers hidden in there, and it's like it's the most Sparkle Jets record anybody's made that wasn't ours. I mean, if you think about it,
But also,
it really is exactly
I guess,
our recipe in a way.
I guess it also kind of goes back to the fact that every once in a while, you'll say something like, "Well, I guess we're just kind of trying to go out there as the shitty new pornographers," and I'll say, "But I thought we were the shitty new pornographers." So,
Yeah, we definitely.
P.S. Neither of us are actually shitty. It's just a little joke between us.
Yeah, because we all our bands kind of started at the same time. We were already kind of doing our thing when I first heard them, but it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's definitely similarities, and I've never really figured that out. But it's like, yeah, we got Girl Singer, all the hits. Anyway,
I still remember the first time when I saw them on Microsoft Network when they were just doing stuff, and they listed our band, and then they said, if you like Sparkle Jets UK, you like the new pornographers.
That's
and
you know what?
I was screaming.
Can we put that on the?
Wow.
I was screaming.
I like it.
Absolutely screaming.
That should actually that'd be a
shit.
great sticker. If you like Sparkle Jets UK, then you'll like the new pornography, like in small letters underneath.
That's the sticker. That's the sticker.
That is great.
There was another thing that one of the radio guys that we were doing radio for said, if you like Weezer's, with all due respect to Weezer, Sparkle Jets UK is the best nerd rock band on the planet.
Oh, love that.
well,
Nerd rock.
There's a lot of
That's a
stuff
good
that's
one.
kind of coming into focus that might revolve around Weezer and Baby Lemonade and some other stuff. We'll tell you about that later. Yeah, this is all very hush hush. But I think the point here is to come up with the nutty idea and then just move forward. I think that's baked into, as we talked about, the craziness of the
we did
band's
that
name
cover
and
album
the
that-
craziness of this Tribute to Yourselves record.
we did so we put that out.
It's just
and-
legendary.
But tell what happened. We thought the idea on the drive home, and luckily the 405 was closed that night. So it took
Nobody's
us
ever said that sentence
Yeah.
ever before.
Took us to
Luckily.
4 a.m. to get home, and
Right.
Then the next day I was at work, and I sent a message out over email to, like, I don't know, probably the Oddities mailing list or something, and a few different people. I go, we joked about this last night, but like, we're thinking about doing this thing where we have other bands play our songs. Would anybody be interested in doing that? And I sent the email out. I went to lunch. I came back. My inbox was full.
Yeah.
And everybody that I told immediately said, "Of course."
And you got to appreciate that doesn't seem like as the nature of that project would be challenging today, but manageable. The fact that it was being done then is staggering, and that it actually
back then only there was a few of the bands that had either the means to record themselves or were willing to pay. I think only maybe one or two of the bands on that whole list actually made their own thing and sent it.
Some of them came to your studio.
Oh,
And
yeah, about a third of them, or maybe half, came to my studio, and I had to track them. And then a few of them paid for studio time, and it was a big thing.
we ran out of songs.
We ran out of songs immediately.
There's that.
Because we only had, I think, 14 on our first album, and 3 of those were covers. So those all got caught, and then I'd started doing Pop Dudes with John Borak, so we did one of the old Patty and Susan show songs. And then I gave somebody one of my old ones that I never did, and then we had a few that we'd been doing in the set that were brand new songs, and we gave those to people to do.
Well, I think at that point, the whole thing is veered so much into fictional alternate reality land that you can actually even bank on sort of like people assuming that this is some weird B-side that they've got to seek out on a flexi disc somewhere, even though it just didn't really exist at all to begin with.
Two bands wrote songs about us.
Right, yeah.
Was it just 2? I thought there was a few more. I thought it was like 4.
Well, there was 2 that wrote.
Nipper and Sea Turtle wrote
he
a
had
song.
a thing that he put our name on, but Nipper's song was about us, about you primarily. Like, I wish I could be in a band with this Susan girl. She's really cool, but she lives in Orange County, so she's geographically undesirable. And then we were working with Robbie and the Andersons coming down all the way from Van Nuys or Woodland Hills or something to Fullerton to my studio on almost a daily basis to record.
Wow.
So they just did their track live, and then I realized later that I accidentally recorded it in mono, and I wanted it to be stereo, so I made them do it again, and they were really mad. So because they'd made it up on the spot, so they had to make it up again and try to be just as funny. The mono version's a little better, but
it's always that way, isn't it?
Yeah, but so that record happened, and not long after that, we'd come up with another idea on one of our drives to a gig, like, hey, maybe we should record a bunch of their songs that we like, And at the time, we were just meeting everyone and going to these IPO shows, and we'd been given one of the, I think it was IPO Volume 2, a compilation. The first one he did that was like a 2-disc set. And a lot of the songs on Best of Friends are on that record. So if you can find a copy of IPO Volume 2...
Or 3. It might be 3.
One of those, or maybe a little of both. Yeah, it was whatever they were giving out the year that we did the show the first time. And I remember we'd met everybody there, and things just started clicking. But we'd made this list of we should record a bunch of their songs. And I typed it all up and I put it in the computer as a text file. And
so for context, we're looking at about the turn of the millennium at this point.
Yeah, it was 1999, 2000-ish.
This is the bookend.
Yeah.
And we should kind of mention even if there's a deeper dive podcast into that, because everyone's going to be clamoring for that. This record, that is other bands doing Sparkle Jets. This is kind of lain dormant for a while. But it will be made available because it really is the bookend with the Best of Friends record. Folks that sort of engage with this as a way to discover that scene, there'll be two different. It's kind of funny. There'll be two different ways to look at it. Neither of which is a collection of the original bands doing their original songs. Someone else can do that, I guess. Someone else can handle that.
You can buy the real albums, but I mean that original thing we did is called I Heart Sparkle Jets UK. It has the heart symbol, but it's kind of like one of those old bumper stickers, because we even had the line in one of our songs about the Pinto with the bumper sticker on it. So we made that, we put that on the cover, and there's a lot of bumper sticker, art on there. But
more weird characters to type out when you're
and it's still going to become a problem for you. But if you have an original copy of that CD, or if you happen to buy one, which I think you'll be able to get on BigStirRecords.com, because there's still a lot of the old original stock that we're going to be selling. If you put it in a computer, if that's still a thing that you own, is a computer with a CD player in it, it's got CD-ROM content on it.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out how to.
Both of our albums do, actually, and one of the things that has on there is a video of David Bash belly dancing at his birthday party at Mont of Tunis.
Way to sell it, dude.
Which is really hilarious. And then there's a recording of him actually introducing the whole CD, which is kind of funny. And a bit at the end where he and David and John Borak say a bunch of obnoxious things. But in the bonus contents, there's some other little interviews in there with them. There's actually songs from each of the bands on the CD. One of their originals is in there as an MP3 hidden in that data. And there's lyrics and graphics and pictures of the other bands. A lot of stuff is in there that most people don't even know. But if you were to put it in an old computer back then, or now if you have one that works, there's just it launches a little HTML page.
So your grandma can see it.
Yeah. I don't even have a way of looking at it myself right now.
We'll figure this out, because we should be able to just bundle it.
But it's there. I mean, it's out there.
That little external hard drive.
It's a matter
drive.
of making sure we can sort of just get these files in a way that people can. We'll take care of you guys.
We'll figure it out.
Easter eggs? Were those Easter eggs even before they were Easter eggs?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff. There's a little video on there, or one of them. There's a lot of stuff, because it was a fun thing to do at the time, so we kind of went out of our way to make it extra.
Do you remember what first inspired us? It was a Negro Problem record. It was a record. We played it, and we just let it go.
Yeah.
And then after 10 minutes, after just letting it go, something else would come back in.
Their CD had bonus
there was an entire EP at the end of one of their.
It had a lot of 6 more songs.
Yeah, it was literally an EP's worth of some crazy stuff. The one that's the super hard pan stereo thing. So that was.
But we all did that back then, and even every dumb little CD we made on our CD burners, we would do that. And I almost did it the other day, making a CD master for this label. And I was like, I have 20 more minutes of free space. I can put whatever I want in there. And I'm like, nobody wants that anymore. So
we always
said no, and I didn't do it.
We kind of sometimes we'll throw stuff on the hard copies that's not. Actually, I think 2 of our records have a little thing. It's actually become a running joke now that there's a gap, and then there's some kind of weird ambient bullshit, which is always called the Armoires are the Sunshine Harmony
Doodah band.
backwards masking consortium.
That's it.
They're all riffs on Village Green, but they have
Right.
like Lou Reed. And then after that, there's like 2 more tracks, and a lot of times we don't put those on the digital. They're like I don't think you can stream the.
Oh,
the
okay.
bonus
Well, I
tracks,
can still do that. I mean, I haven't paid the bill yet, so I can pull that file down and remaster the album if you want.
It's up to you.
What do you guys want? Like fart
stupidity.
noises, tax returns, recited by.
I mean, we usually have
Alexa.
like a couple of real songs. I think it always really was ripped off of that specifically that Negro Problem issue record, but it's usually some kind of weird thing and then a couple of songs or something like that.
Yeah, there's always had like a drum roll between each song.
Yeah.
I love it.
Anyway,
my heart.
so that's where that's
So that thing happened. We made the list of songs that we would do for a follow up where we played their songs. And I think I'd even amended the list a few times over the years, but it basically just sat there on my computer. And the day that I had this little epiphany in the shower, I went and pulled that up and looked at it, and I go, yeah, I still kind of want to record all those. And I called these guys and go, do you want to maybe actually make that thing? I mean,
So question,
why not?
Had you kind of pushed the button on doing the third originals record yet, or
No.
which actually came first?
No, the Best of Friends was first. It was already in the plant before this thing existed, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, I mean, because
And quite a
its
story.
origins go back.
Yeah, yeah.
Before, yeah, of
Yeah.
course, yeah. Well,
But maybe that'll have
that'll
to
be
be
when
the
we-
next podcast.
Yeah, when we
series.
do the 45 podcast episodes about
Yeah.
that record, and you get to edit them.
But so Best of Friends, just that was the origin of that, and I think it was right towards the end of my summer vacation, and I was like, well, I guess I can do it. So I think I did the bulk of the basic tracks in about 2 weeks and got everything kind of up to sounding right, and then Susan would come by and sing her vocals, and Jamie would come by and put bass on, and we had the bulk of it done in a couple of weeks, but it took us another 6 months to kind of get every other little missing piece plugged in, and then it was finally done. And it turned out being a pretty big collection of stuff. We added a couple songs. There's also a lot of ones that we've thought of since we finished it. Yeah. Bands that we should have probably covered, and we just didn't cross our mind at the time.
And you're at a double record already,
Yeah.
so yeah.
So if we didn't cover your song and you're in a band from back then and wondering why the hell we didn't, just sorry.
Look for part 2.
Yeah.
Volume 2.
Yeah,
Yay.
buy this
Next
one and
Best
maybe
of
we'll
Friends.
make more. But yeah, I'll get bored. And again, it's going to happen. I mean, I still don't have a whole bunch of new songs to write. So maybe this summer when I've got the itch, I'll have to just make Best of Friends too.
Next Best of Friends.
It'll happen.
Or a tribute to the Armoires.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how we're going to get that Armoire song on there.
Jekyll on high, sketch 'em up inside a cell, 'cause we've had it so well. You're blowing your lines, hit 'em up inside a flame, but the cake's in the rain. What can I do? Been around for such a long time. What can I say? You've been right about the wrong time. But I wake, mountains pop out of the cave, healing around
That was a cool track, a little bit of In and Around Greg Lake, originally by the Wondermints. We had a really fun time figuring that one out. And now we're going to steer our conversation into a different neighborhood. I think you had some stuff you want to talk about, Rex? Rex?
And I wanted to kind of say, as this series unfolds, you're going to hear from a lot of these original artists. But I wonder maybe like if each of you could say, and I don't want to say hopefully this is not sort of like picking favorites, because it's not like, this was my favorite band to cover. But
experience, maybe favorite
or
experience,
maybe what struck you as something that like you could take and make your own. Like if everyone could just kind of grab a track or two, or talk about like what it was like picking this material, and then what it was like grappling with it and making it and feeling like you either had to live up to the original or change it. Just talk about some of the tunes and how you guys related to it in this process.
Well, first when you look at this stuff, the reason why I started playing music or ever picked up a guitar is because I'm a fan. So that comes from that place. It comes from my heart. I would say, it's really hard to pick your favorites. Like
course,
it's like children.
Oh, no,
but,
I know that was a terrible question.
These records that we made recordings of, they inspired us. And I've got to say, when we came to do the Negro Problem, we knew we couldn't just do one song because it was just too. It was so hard. So that's why we ended up doing both of those songs. But these are songs that we, if we wore out the records, we wore out the CDs, we ended up giving them to our children. Because
Yeah, and I'm looking at the list, and that's true in most of the cases. Like, it's not just these songs. Some of them are kind of standalone because maybe that artist only did one or two things. But for the most part, they're all albums that were pretty much good start to finish. And it was hard time even picking one song from each band to do out of the whole batch. And it was just kind of like, well, what's my favorite one? Or this band's really special to you. What's your favorite one? And we'd argue about it. And there was a lot of these are because we tried to keep it one per band, and there would have been 5 or 6 or more choices, and it was just a matter of what was on our original list. I just went right down and just knocked them out. We didn't really mess with them too much.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that in listening to it, the first time we heard it, which I think was pretty close to its final form, was that I had this feeling sort of like you could have sort of gotten to this point where you're saying, well, we can pace this record so that we're picking a slower song from this band, or a quirkier song from this band, or a more pastoral song from this band, and then a rocker from this band and stuff like that. What you guys seem to do instead, and the reason I think this record will kind of like kick people in the nuts repeatedly for about 80 solid minutes, is you kind of just did the shit that should have been on the radio, and you did it like it should sound like if it was going to be on the radio, and it's just kind of like a
best of.
A best of.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Everybody should know every one of these songs.
Yeah.
They are that good.
And you kind of pick the gateways, the instant grabbers from artists that have
a lot of cases,
a lot of deep catalog stuff, rather than jigsawing it to be, representing this side of this artist. It's like a K-Tel monster, you know.
You can drop in and grab somebody's, and I won't say that any of these are necessarily these bands' best songs, because that's a disservice, but they are definitely, it's not, we didn't pick, like
they're
you
grabbers,
said, we didn't, we just picked the good stuff every time, and so just for us trying to decide what order to put them in was freaking
that was the hardest
impossible.
Thing of all.
For sure.
Sequencing is tough.
Sequencing is hard anyway, but when every song you have is kind of a winner, then we had to think of it like vinyl. And for those of you who have never actually had to sequence a vinyl record, there's a reason why the up-tempo thing starts the record off, and the fast songs are at the top of the side, and then you get the slow ones towards the end of the side. That's just part of the physical reality of vinyl. And I could get into the science of that. Take my class. I'll tell you later. But that was part of it too. So you'll hear like ballady type ones more towards the end of a side, and we also have to space it out. But the last song on this is just as good as the first one or the one in the middle. There's no bump, and it's kind of funny because when you get to make an album, you don't really usually have a choice to pick like. We just got to go and like pick the best candies off the pile, and hoard them. I mean,
it's funny, you do have to sequence it, but it almost is really served by just like putting the one record in there and shuffling it.
Yeah, it
'cause
wouldn't even
it's
matter.
It's
It
a
wouldn't make any
jukebox type
difference.
experience, you know.
In fact, that some of these, it's like they're hitting you over the head. So sometimes I'll go through and I'm listening to tracks, and it's like these all sound kind of the same for a second because they all kind of start off with this big like, you know, with this big drum fill, you know, that I probably recorded the same day. So there is kind of a sameness to it. But the funny thing is, I don't know. I always say me because I'm usually the one at the front end of this. It's not like we don't record like where we're all in a room and we play together. It's usually just me, and then I'll start it, and then these guys will come do their stuff later. So I say me a lot, but I tend to do covers pretty religiously close to the original. Not because I don't have an original idea. It's just that's what I like about the song. Mm-hmm. And
You're being reverent.
yeah, usually the way they sing it or the way they played it is why I like it. But what's funny about it, it really makes the album that much better because every song is kind of like the original and why it was good. And we also realized that by putting this out, if you don't know the history on us or the backstory of these songs and these bands, it's just kind of like a whole album of awesome.
Yeah,
A double
Right.
album of where every song kicks ass.
and a reason to go look for those artists' other recordings.
Yeah, so it's kind of a win-win-win-win.
That's a pretty good overview of what you've done and why. And I mean, I think if anything else, for you guys to maybe just say a few more words. Like Susan, you got started with talking about a couple of the tunes. Any of the other things that maybe you guys want to say about like what was something that absolutely had to be on there, or that maybe was challenging, or just anything else? Because this is the chance to talk about what you guys did on this record. So
for me, there really was the friendship, and that's the thing. And like, whenever at first I immediately thought of the friendship that we had with the Masticators, because it was such an incredible band, and we really thought that they were the ones that were going to break out. And so to do Lisa's, anything that Lisa did, because she was also very close with Susan, and that was
But everybody in that band, we were studio mates. When we how long was it, for 3 years?
At least, yeah.
That we shared the studio, and we challenged each other because they would do a song, honestly, and then we'd go, God damn it, that was really good.
oh, I love this stuff. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
this
so
is
the whole
really
time we were
inspiring.
doing like, say, because our first album was obviously done and out there before we met any of these folks. But as soon as we did meet everybody, we were already, starting to work on new songs for the follow-up. And I think we maybe tracked one or two things kind of on our first system. And then we started working with Robbie, and he brought a computer for the first time. And we started doing that instead of ADATs. And so other than maybe the first couple of tracks on Bamboo Lounge, most of it was done after they were there. So Masticators were working on, I think they had, their whole first album was done before we met them, but they started working on a second album. The Andersons made their whole second album at our studio. A lot of the stuff from the band ended up being Receiver, some of it started there, and a lot of it got finished at my place. Same for the Dawns. And probably some other bands I'm forgetting that kind of came through there, and a lot of projects Robbie worked on or I worked on. But we were all kind of there, and in fact, our band was probably recording there the least. Like there was always another pop band in my house. I'd come home and there they were, or somebody else that I didn't even know, and there'd be these bands like sleeping on my couch. And
And then when we weren't recording,
whole
then we were
band.
trying to rehearse. And so we had to,
the
I think we
gear would
rehearsed a
be
little
there.
bit more
Yeah.
because we can't give up our spot. We have to, so
yeah,
just,
in some ways it did that, and then there were other times where we would just go up to the cabin in the mountains where we do a lot of tracking there too. And sometimes I'd have my own studio underneath where I lived, but I'd be up in a cabin, 2 hours out of town,
Right.
tracking because I just couldn't even really get time in my own studio. And so there was good things and bad things, but mainly it was fun, and it was just kind of watching how the other bands worked. And we tried to kind of emulate that. I don't know that we ever really succeeded in the same way they did. Like the way that you guys work the Armoires, you're very much like you're around when you're working,
Yeah.
even if
Yeah.
even if you're just standing there drinking a coffee, you want to be in the room. And I always would encourage these guys. I'd be like, let's all hang out together and do this.
The other folks though that were on there, in answer to your question, for me, the music program that we created at Huntington Beach, we really did take the spirit of Sparkle Jets and transferred it right into this program, and that wouldn't have happened without all these people from the pop scene, because our very first gig with the kids was at a Chinese restaurant, and at that gig we had Kenny House come down, who's on the record. That would lead us into the Apple Store, where we played a gig at the Apple Store in Fashion Island, and we had a line out the door and people were dancing in the aisles of the Apple Store, and Robbie Rist was there playing drums at that point. Shortly after that, the next big show we did, John Borak basically raised the money. He raised, I think, I've got to check with him, we're $5,000, which bought our first drum set for the program. So all of the, and then as it further went on, we did a homecoming show, and Adam Marsland came down from the scene and helped us. Did a battle of the bands where Third Grade Teacher came down, and then as things got even crazier, like Walter Clevenger, his son was in our program. As far as, so he trusted us with his son to play drums, and there was all of this magic that happened because of this pop scene.
And it's also, if you kind of followed this sort of theme of family and these bands sort of like being in sleeping on each other's couches and stuff, it does kind of point out that there's a huge fan component to you guys picking these songs, but
Yes.
it was also songs that you lived in and lived with on an even deeper level than that, because you were there as they were being developed and responding to that, and then these bands are responding to what you guys are doing. I mean, it would be great to see like a curated, thoughtful, after the fact, like nuggets type compilation mirroring this. The rights nightmare would be something someone else can deal with, but that level of involvement, even gets. And I know from having listened to you guys speak with these artists that there are aspects of it where when you got into the nuts and bolts of recording it, you remember what it was like when they were recording their versions, and then that lets you dial into and pick out at those parts that you want to emulate or you want to change. Or I always thought this should have this there. So I mean, I think it shines through.
Yeah, it definitely was fun. Mostly, I said we'd had a list from way back. We kind of stuck to it for the most part, which kind of helped make the decisions. If we had to start from scratch, what would we do? It would be much harder. But meaning that we made these decisions in like the year 2000 of what songs to do, it kind of was easier to just go down the list and do them. That's
true. It's almost like finding like a recipe from back in the day that makes it that much more authentic when you prepare the dish, even if you're doing it with like today's elements.
Yeah, so we just kind of went for it, and those are even the song choices from each band. It's stuff we argued about in a car on the way to the gig West LA in 2000 whatever it was. No, we should do guys are dumb, or no, I want to do today will be yesterday tomorrow, and we'd have to decide which one we would do. So yeah, and some of these bands, I mean, frick, the Shazam, come on. Mm-hmm. We did Ludlow 618 from Adam the Cockeyed Ghost, which was about the hardest vocal I've ever had to do in my life. It took, and I just do them once or twice and I'm good, but it took me a couple months to really nail that one. I did it over and over again. And when I told him that, just as if to say, props to you, Adam, I had to do that song. It took me like a couple months to kind of get it right. He goes, oh, it took me 4 or 5 months to get it right. Because he had the same problem. Because it's just, and you wouldn't know it, but it's hard to sing.
Capture
Yeah, that was a little bit of Ludlow 618, originally by Cockeyed Ghost and written by Adam Marsland. That was a tricky one to sing, and we also had a tough time learning the Wondermint song and some other ones too.
The Sugar Plastic song, we actually tried to record a number of times in the past. You know, we tracked that as far back as our first album, trying to do a cover of it, but we never quite, got it together.
That would have been neat.
It's happened a few times. We've tried to record that.
Yeah, I mean, I always think it's kind of cool. It's rare when, like, the cover on the record is something that's contemporaneous, like as opposed to, like the band's kind of listening to each other. Well, I mean, you got a whole record of that with I Love Sparkle Jets, but it's a neat thing when that actually shows up on the record. It shows that back and forth. I always kind of say it's like a low key, modest version of Brian Wilson and Paul McCartney pushing each other along,
Wow.
Just anything like that that speaks to artists inspiring each other in real time. I just dig that.
Yeah, and some of these bands we ended up playing with or playing in or subbing for them. I mean, I know I had to sub for Severo and the Masticators once. I played drums for Third Grade Teacher a couple times. Susan joined the Negro Problem for one album cycle. What else? I mean, I think I sat in with the Dons one time.
And Mr. Borak, who's just walked into the room, would be connective tissue for a ton of
for
these
a lot of
songs.
this
yeah.
stuff. It's been
His
the same
name has
thing.
been mentioned numerous times during this
And
podcast.
only in good ways.
I mean, we can roll the tape back.
Who got proof? Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just looking at the list of stuff. And one of the songs, the original, I actually produced it and played on it. So doing that again was relatively easy because I'd done it once before. And we'd played the Masticator song live a number of times. We'd been the band for Lisa Genio for Candy Pants once or twice when her band was unavailable. We just backed her up for a show that she didn't want to pull out of. I think that happened more than once. And some of these were just songs that we liked or people we kind of marginally knew or kind of had run across but weren't like super tight with, but they were still on the list. So yeah,
It was fun thinking back to the first times we even saw these bands play. We'd been listening to them when we listened to them, and then we'd go and see them play, and it was like a religious experience.
yeah, it's
Good. And people were so approachable and so nice and just generous.
Yeah, there's definitely, like I said, it's a good thing to work within your genre. It's a double-edged sword, of course, because you might go do a show with 4 other pop bands and the music's all congruous and nice and everybody likes it, but we had 2 problems. One was that we could get a bigger following if we played a show with 4 other pop bands than we would on a night with no other pop bands. We would get more people there to see us and appreciate us, but the same group of people were there to see all 4 or 5 bands, so it looks like a smaller group. And then also, there was never a lot of girls going to Power Pop gigs. It was a bit of a sausage fest, unless you were in the band. And then also, we were all kind of a bunch of teetotalers, a lot of them. So the bars would be mad because we weren't selling enough drinks.
Yeah, that problem didn't go
So
away
I did my best
20
to
years later,
alleviate
yeah.
that problem for a while.
And then that became a problem.
Yeah, and then that.
as it will tend to do.
But yeah, so if we had just had more drinkers and more girls in our audience, we'd all be rich right now.
But I do want to say, from the label's perspective, I mean, we're like really proud to be involved in this record, and for everything that it represents, the history of the whole thing, and also the very nowness of the whole thing as well. And it is funny. I don't know how many hours worth of podcast you've got to like truly explain what this thing is on its at its core and the depths of it and all the connections that it represents. But this is probably the 3rd time I've said this in this interview. But it also is just a chunk of great songs that you can truly enjoy and that really transport you. The wealth of the material and the way you guys perform them. and everything you bring to them, together. It's just kind of the best of both worlds. I hope it inspires people to do a deep dive into your catalog and the catalog of all these other artists, and to sort of understand some of what was happening at that time if they haven't ever before, or relive it if they have. But I also think there's going to be people out there that can just take it on face value as great performances of great songs. And I think that's what's exciting to us. It's the thing about this form in a certain sense, which is that it is immediate, and yet there's a great depth underlying it. So you can you'll never be bored hearing it for the first time.
No,
Right,
and
right.
the deep dives will be equally as exciting.
Yeah, that's the one thing that not us as a band, but the genre that we do, the music that we like is it should kick your butt with the first time you hear it, and then
unfold for years thereafter.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Decades thereafter.
usually with any album you like, there's kind of a pop song that gets you interested, and then it's that really good deep ballad that keeps you coming back. I think this record has a little bit of both.
I mean, I think the thing that excites me is the fact that the pop song that catches you at first listen also
has
is that
depth,
same
yeah.
song that has that depth that you can spend years
Right.
and decades plumbing and understanding. And
Yeah, and this isn't really about us anyway. It's about the whole thing. And I'm hoping, and the reason we're doing these podcasts and talking about this is, even if it's just for our own edification, is to wipe the dust off this stuff and dislodge everybody and everything surrounding this, so that people maybe look into it. Maybe just the people involved. Maybe me talking to so and so. And all of us sitting here podcasting with these people will, dislodge them a little, dislodge us a little, and see where we go from here, whether people are discovering this or whether we get off the couch and start or putting stuff back in, or if there is a compilation in our future for real that these things start getting talked about, or some idiot wants to try to write a book about it. I already mentioned this to John. We're all like, I don't know if anyone wants to read it, but we have the ability to make it if somebody wants it. But and I know Robbie and I and a lot of people have joked about that for 20 years about when they write the book about the pop scene, this blah blah blah. But it's, I don't know. There may be some pay dirt in there somewhere.
I mean, I think in a lot of ways there is, and I think it's great to tap into this as not just a nostalgia thing, and even if to say the act of saying this demonstrates in the fact that you guys have another record coming, and that brings it into the now, into the present, very much into the present. I think there's a shakeup that can occur there. That sort of, I mean, when you think about it, there's a nostalgia baked into the type of material that we're doing to begin with, but we're also all these bands are constantly demonstrating. They were demonstrating at the turn of the century, and they're demonstrating now that well of possibilities is far from dry. So it's just so cool to go back in there and say, this was happening then, this pushed the form forward then, this added great things to the canon then. And we're doing that now too, to just kind of make that continuum of, it's amazing. It's amazing that there's still so much to be done. There's a lot to be celebrated that's happened that people don't know enough about, and there's still so much to be done. And it's an honor to be working with people like you guys.
What Rex said completely.
So shut off this podcast and go listen to this music already. Let's pee.